I think we all would benefit from watching it. Now, what do you get when you mix a school principal and a Marine spouse together? Well, you get Jill Gaitens, who is our speaker, and she's going to talk to us about the Military Children's Education Coalition. How many people in here have heard of that before today? We have one person. Well, there are 4 million children who are involved in it, worldwide or nationally, I should say. It's a very interesting organization that we need to be aware of. So without further ado, Jill, come talk to us.
Kind of short for this podium. Thank you so much for allowing me to come and speak to you today. I've spoken to about 40 different Rotary organizations around the United States and one overseas, so it's been kind of a long journey. I did 25 years in education with my husband through 11 different moves. So we've lived in 4 different states, 2 different countries. I'm originally from Michigan. Several people have asked me where I'm from. And that's a question that military families get asked all the time, but I'm from Michigan, my husband's from Wisconsin, I've got a son from California, one from Japan, and another one that we picked up in Arizona. We call them surveyors. We're not allowed to pack a lot in the military, but they move our children. So, I'm with the Military Child Education Coalition, as he indicated. I also sit on the governor's panel for the Military Interstate Compact, and you had one of my colleagues, I think a couple weeks ago, Dr. Aaron Spence. Dr. Spence also sits on that commission with me. And in Virginia, we've really done a lot of work to make sure that we're counting our military-dependent students and we know where they are. So we have a brand new military indicator that all schools this year, no matter how rural or how urban, are reporting the number of military-dependent students attending their schools so that we can provide services through MSEC and through the Department of Defense to those children appropriately. And then 2 days ago, we found out that there is also a national military child indicator in the reauthorization of the Elementary Secondary Act. That national indicator will allow us once again to find out where all these kids are and answer the question that we've always wanted to know is how are they doing? In Dr. Spence's district in Virginia Beach, they have a grant from the Department of Defense that I worked with them to bring into their school division. And that grant allowed us to find out that in Virginia Beach, the military-dependent students are higher performing than the traditional civilian students in that community. But that's not really a clear picture because most of the other students are somehow also connected to the military. Either they're the grandchildren of military service members, the children of veterans, or they have a sibling in the military. But today I'm just going to tell you a little bit about these kids and about some of their needs. And then I'm going to tell you a little bit about what MSEC does, because I saw that one hand go up. I was so excited, because sometimes I don't get any hands. We're very, very well known in the military community in schools and on bases. So the DoD knows about us, and most of our schools know about us, but outside of those communities, people really don't know what's available. So a lot of people come in and they see a problem and they want to fix it. They don't realize that there's some phenomenal organizations out there that we can connect them with through Fleet and Family to help with those problems, and we have quite a few resources. We have scholarships, space camp, student-to-student programs, and I just want to make sure that when you're meeting with military families, if they mention that they're having an issue, you know where to send them for the right resources. Our mission is really about education. We do not leave our lane, so we don't provide meals for the hungry, we don't provide health services. We're really just focused on 4 million military-dependent students worldwide. So we have branches wherever you'll find a military base. So if you visit Italy and you're on a military base, you're going to find our logo. If you're in Okinawa, I'll be there in 2 weeks. Wherever you find military kids, you're going to find MSEC and you're going to find our programs. But our big base is out of Parker Heights, Texas. Fun fact, if you entered a classroom this year as a sophomore, you have never known a time when the United States was not at war. From the time you were born, we have been at war. So when you think about the longest war that we have ever had in the United States and the number of children that have been affected dramatically, that's why we need organizations and that's why we need awareness of that these children are in our schools. In this community, we have served the highest concentration of military-dependent students in the nation. These children are invisible in our schools. 80% of our students go to civilian schools. In this community, we do not have Department of Defense schools. So when you look around this room, do you know if the person sitting across from you is a veteran or they've served in the military? Raise your hand if you've served in the military. Raise your hand if you have a spouse that served in the military. Raise your hand if you have a child in the military. Anyone have a sibling? It is, at this point, I think almost everybody's hand has gone up. We are all connected to the military. And we've got a different thing going on with our kids now because of the number of service members that are coming back that have survived some horrific injuries. Many of our children are now taking on the role of caregiver. You don't see what happens in the homes, but our schools are really the safe place for children because they know what time class starts, they know what time class ends, they know it's a predictable place. So when a child acts out in a classroom, many times they're acting out in the safe place, the place where they feel like they can get the most care, and that's just natural. But for many of these children, they go home to situations that are invisible from the outside, but they may have a mother or father with traumatic brain injury. They may have a mother or father who has not been home for a year. We just got a brand new group of families that entered into our area yesterday. We're talking over 2,000 families, and over how many children are associated with that one ship? A week before Christmas, these families are living in temporary housing. They're probably not going to get into permanent housing for at least 3 weeks. They are going to be entering into schools right after Christmas break, and many of those children are coming from an area that school started in mid-July. So if they're leaving out of Japan with that strike group, school started there in mid-July. They've already attended an entire semester of school and finished a semester. When they enter into our school, especially our high school students, they're going to now have to repeat a half a semester before they get into final exams and get their credits. So these kids are going to go to school for about an extra month and a half before they catch up. They've been attending a Department of Defense school over in Japan. All of those students were in the Department of Defense Corps. They do the core classroom, and I'm not sure if you understand the difference between some of the curriculums across the United States, but Virginia's curriculum is extremely unique. The SOL test means something completely different for military families. I'm sorry, when somebody told me that was a test, I honestly thought my superintendent was joking with me when he told me the name of the test, and I laughed because I thought, he can't be serious. Dr. Merrill was. When I came here, I worked for Virginia Beach City Public Schools, so I had to learn all these acronyms. The acronyms in Virginia are very different from the acronyms in the military. So I usually play alphabet soup. I'm not going to torture you with it today because I saw enough hands go up where you probably know what TDY is. Yeah. Temporary duty yonder. Seriously. For our teachers, they need to know that TDY means my dad is leaving but he's coming back. They need to know that PCS means I'm moving, I will not be here tomorrow. Many of our families speak military jargon, and they're unable to translate that jargon into the same educational jargon. So I'm not going to burden you with that today, but let me just tell you it's a problem in this area because we don't know the difference between PCS and TDY, and that's a big difference in a family's life. My region in Hampton Roads has 12 districts with 364 schools.
How many kids?
Next slide. We serve over 262,000 students because I serve military and non-military. 67,000 of those students are the children of active duty service members in all services. We have joint commands in this area, so whether you're Coast Guard, Marine Corps, Navy, Army, Air Force, we serve those students in those schools. 26% of the students in all of those 12 divisions are military. And those are just the children of active duty military. My children,
not reserves?
Those are not the reserves, and that's not the National Guard. Those are just active duty military. That does not include the children of veterans. So that number more than doubles when you start including those groups. But again, 1 in 4 children in every classroom in this area is a military dependent student. That does not mean that every classroom looks the same. If I go over and I visit Bird Neck Elementary, 80% of those children are the children of active duty military service. If I go over to Camp Allen, 100%. Both of those schools have poverty levels that exceed 90%.
Wow.
So we are talking young enlisted families with the least resources attending schools with the highest need. In Norfolk, where I presented last week, over 45% of the schools have not made accreditation. Those schools serve the needs of military dependent students. So we have a lot of military dependents that come into our area. They're extremely concerned about their child's education because they know they will not be here permanently. So they need to not fall behind while they're here so that they can catch up very quickly in their new communities. But as they matriculate in and out of these communities, education is the one choice that a military spouse really has. I don't have a choice where I'm going to live. My husband's going to tell me where I'm going to live, and I'm fine with that. That's the choice I made in my life. My son doesn't have a choice of where he's going to live. He's an active duty Marine. So he's going to be moving around the nation. But you better believe when we get to a new community, the first thing we do is look up the schools and say, where is my child going to attend school? And we will make sacrifices. Military families have the highest percentage of families that homeschool. A very large proportion of us attend private schools. My children have attended private schools, they've attended charter schools, they've attended public schools. And in this community, that's the very first question a family makes. What is the quality of the school system that now I'm going to have to deal with? Around the nation, 9 military bases have open charter schools on base because the quality of their schools were not meeting the needs of their military families. So Davis-Monthan down in Arizona, which is quite remote, they had to open their own school to serve the needs of their families. Here we are very lucky because we have many, many choices. We have governor schools, we have academies, we have a close-knit community, so if I can't find what I want in one community, I'll move to the next. But this 1 in 4 in the classroom is really an important number because even when you go out to rural areas of this community, you do find that we still have a high percentage of military-dependent students in those rural communities. So when I go out to Creeds, and actually I'm going to be in Knott's Island very soon, Knott's Island has a high percentage of military-dependent students in their community because it's part of their culture. So they've gone off, they've done their service, they come back, and it becomes part of the culture in that community. So I'm really excited to be out there. I'm not going to show you a video today, but if you get a chance, and if you Google when you get home, building capacity for military kids, there's an amazing video you can share with friends and family. It's about 3.5 minutes long. I highly encourage you to take a look at it because it speaks from a child's perspective. And it was done by a grantee of ours, Building Capacity. They do a lot of research on military-dependent students, and if you want to know what a child thinks about being in the military, it really is from the voice of the children. So you will not hear one adult in that video. Perfect. I can get right up. Oh, really? I'll do it at the very end in case we've got time. But I don't know if we have sound.
Only what the computer will generate.
Yeah, I was going to say, from the voices of the children.
Use the mic to.
We can do something.
We can try something.
Sorry for the interruption.
That's okay. When we're talking about the needs of military-dependent students, I'm going to talk from some different perspectives. I've talked a little bit about academic considerations and gaps in curriculum. But in many ways, we're also talking about gaps in teaching styles and the way students are taught in classrooms. Department of Defense schools are very, very closely aligned to military communities, whereas civilian schools, they wouldn't think to pick up a phone and call a gentleman's command if someone doesn't turn in an impact aid card. It's just not part of a civilian school culture. And in civilian schools, my children complained about civilian schools because they said the kids didn't behave. And I'm thinking to myself, I know you don't behave either. But what they were saying is the culture in the civilian schools was a lot more loose. Because in a military school, if you do something wrong, you know it's going to get back to dad's command. In a civilian school, you don't have that same threat. So my boys refused to attend dances from the time we got to Virginia Beach. We got here when they were in when my oldest was in his junior year. We've been here for about 4 years now. And now he's in the Marine Corps, so it's been a little while. They've got to know the culture. But none of my kids will attend dances because they say the kids, I think they get offended by the way kids dance. And I've been to a couple of Department of Defense dances, and they're a lot more sedate. So there's sort of a subtle culture. When everyone's in uniform, you're on your best behavior. One of the other things that we kind of run into are just the kids dealing with the transfer of credits. Like I mentioned, that when kids are coming here right now from Japan, they've attended school for a lengthier period of time. But the kids from Virginia, when they transfer over to California and San Diego, because we're a Navy town, we've got this great rotation. Our kids go to Washington, Florida, San Diego, and Virginia Beach, or Norfolk, kind of in a circular motion. When they go out to San Diego, they'll find out that school started in July. So if they started in September and they haven't finished a semester and they get transferred to San Diego, they're behind, but now they may not get any of the credits that they just went to school for 3 months for because they can't finish the semester when they get to San Diego.
Oh, wow.
The way our calendars work is dramatically affecting the transfer of credits for our secondary students. So we're running into a situation where families are choosing to homestead. So the family stays in one place, the service member leaves for 3 years or leaves for 1 year so that the children don't lose credit and they're able to graduate on time. We're pretty lucky in Virginia because we honor the Military Interstate Compact, but not all states are honoring. And last year, the 50th state, New York, finally signed on to the compact. So the compact says that we'll honor those credits. In New York, they haven't even seated a compact commission yet. DC, where Bowling Air Force Base is just inside the border, and we've got 800 military-dependent students, they haven't seated their compact commission yet. On Bowling Air Force Base, I've got 800 kids. They attend 47 different schools because it's a school choice area. So the military is paying for the busing, and some of those kids are commuting for over an hour each way.
Easily up there.
They do not have a school at Bowling Air Force Base, and Bowling Air Force Base is located across the street from the worst performing schools in the nation. And those are the schools that our military families are assigned to. 200 of those 800 students homeschool. So parents have started almost their own quasi little school up there. And that's happening here in Virginia Beach also, or Virginia Beach, Norfolk, Hampton Roads area. One of the other stressors that's probably an obvious one is relocation. But you really don't think about some of the emotional things about packing your toys up and having to unpack them, or having to leave your things behind. When we moved to Japan, we were allowed to bring 2,000 pounds. So we had to make the decision, what's important? What can we bring? With a few little kids in tow, we brought a lot of toys. To be honest, they sell toys in Japan. I'm probably not my best choice. When we got to Japan, one of my boys slept in a suitcase for almost 3 weeks because we had assumed they also sold cribs in Japan. They had run out of them because so many people were transferring in at the same time. So this was back when they had the Sears catalogs. I had to order from Sears to an APO address, and it took me a while to get a crib. So I have many lovely pictures of my son, and this was before we could just flash a picture home and say, I'm a little dated here, so this was about 20 years ago. But this before I could kind of text my mom and say, send me something. Weird things happened in Japan too. We ran out of milk. So you can't assume that everything is going to be there. When we come into military culture, the biggest thing is the children feel overwhelmed with the number of decisions and the number of changes until we can get them in the schools and get that routine going again. So the strongest thing we can do for these kids is to get them in class as soon as possible, because that overwhelmed feeling, we've done tons of surveys, it goes right away if we can just get them in a stable environment where there's routine. Let the parents make the decisions. Let kind of the world keep going, but those schools are, universally, that's where we're going to get the kids socio-emotionally back on track. Some of the social issues that we run into are making new friends. I cannot tell you the number of teenage girls that tell me that for the first 3 weeks in their new school, they ate lunch in the bathroom because they could hide and they didn't have to go out and make new friends. And in this community, I run into civilian students that ask other students if they're military when they arrive, and they're almost afraid to make friends with them because they know they're going to lose that friendship and they know they're going to leave. At the Military Child Education Coalition, in this community, we have the student-to-student program. It's a civilian and military student mentorship program, and these kids are specially trained. We fly groups of 6 from each of our high schools and each of our middle schools out to Harker Heights, Texas, where they learn how to be peer mentors, and they come back to their community schools and start these student-to-student programs Worldwide, you will find student-to-student programs in almost every school that serves a high number of military-dependent students. Every single school in Virginia Beach has a student-to-student program, every middle school, most of the elementaries. I'm halfway through Norfolk. I've made my way out to Pocosin. We've got them up in DC. If you visit San Diego, you'll see the same student-to-student program. As soon as the kids see our logo, they know that there's a student-to-student program there, and they know they've got a group of people that they can eat lunch with that understand them. So we really encourage the kids, right when they get there, find out, is there a student-to-student program? We have a military student liaison officer assigned to every single school in the United States. It's a huge Department of Defense investment. These are mainly retired service members or the spouses of retired service members. Our regional school liaison officer for this area is Debbie Patch. She's a really good friend of mine. When a family goes to a new school, they typically will call the school liaison officer in the new community first. It's called a warm send-off. And that school liaison officer will immediately let the student-to-student program know that this child is coming. If the child plays sports, the student-to-student program will find out, what sport do you play? How fast can we get you on that sport team? Did you miss football practice? Can we get you on the football team even though you missed that practice?
How does that fit in with Virginia's rules for kids coming in to get on teams?
The Virginia Sports League has been, one of my tiny little nightmares.
Yeah.
Tiny.
You probably saw it in the newspaper, I think it was almost 2 years ago, where we had a young lady, she was a gymnast, and she moved to Japan. It wasn't working out. The family sent her back to this community. She had been on the gymnastics team for years. She had been part of sports teams. That was her thing. And we're talking, this is a highly intelligent child who highly athletic, and when she arrived, she was told she would have to wait a year to be on the sports team.
Yeah.
Because of the Virginia sports
And that's
rules.
still in effect, right?
It is still in effect.
Yeah.
I've been in the classroom 5 years, and I've talked to a lot of these youngsters you're talking about, and their biggest problem is divorce. I've heard it over, and that's the most traumatic thing. And when they're damaged, some of them really are damaged. I'm asking you, I'm just a sub, how do you recommend, that try and console the child to help to adapt? I may even see them once in the school year, but you can tell that they're troubled and they have a difficult time because of personal problems. There's only a single parent, and they come to a new community with just a mom who's got to get some jobs, whatever. So how are you handling that?
The first thing I would tell you is to find out who the military school liaison officer assigned to that school is, because they can connect the children and connect the families to mental health services and support services that are available to them on and off the military base. For example, in Virginia Beach, we have 22 military family life counselors assigned to the schools that are literally clinical psychologists and medical providers, and they are in the schools. They cannot take notes. They cannot collect any more than demographic information, and they are just there to be a warm shoulder for these children.
To talk to.
To talk to. But those school liaison officers will refer that family to the mental health services that they need. Many times military service member families will not reach out to the mental health community because if there's a sense that they have a problem, it really does affect the career.
Yeah, it's a stigma.
It is a stigma still.
Stigma affects their,
Thank you. Thank you very much.
their clearances.
It does affect their clearances. But we also have, on base, we have the availability of military family life officers. Sorry, there's so many military acronyms, I get them all mixed up. MSAC, MFLEX. You would love the MCAS. It's the Military Connected and Academic Support Program grant. And I wish they would pick something besides N because I get tongue-tied every time I speak. On our bases, through MWR, we also have support services that are MFLEX. Those are military family life counselors. Again, they can't take notes. The command is not notified that you're getting that help. Divorce is a huge issue, but divorce is happening in our service more at this point because families are coming back broken and because service members are coming back surviving injuries that in other wars they would not have survived. And you've got to do what's right for your family, and I completely understand that, but we do a training through parent-to-parent programs for families to help families to cope with changes in their life. And divorce is one of those changes. Separation for long periods of time is one of those changes. Deployment, but where we hit the most, by far, where we have the most issues with our families is during reintegration, which you would think, oh, it's wonderful, your family's coming back, we're all back together, but when your husband or wife comes back after being gone for a long time, you have developed routines, your children have developed those routines, And you come in, having come in from a very different environment where a loud noise means something different. And you've got loud kids running around the house. You've got traffic noises that are unfamiliar, that could be dangerous in another community. And you may have had an injury that requires you to maybe be treated a little bit different, and your family doesn't get that. So reintegration is where we would run into most of our mental health issues right now. Post-traumatic stress, you've probably heard of it. Invisible. But for children, it's very, very difficult to understand. The video explains it actually very, very good, so if we have time at the end, we'll go through that. The current efforts, which there are some very positive things happening. I hate to be real negative. It's Friday morning, you should be having fun, it's holiday season. I talked about military school liaison officers, military family life counselors. We also have what's called the DoD EA partnership grants in this community. We have 8 grants, some of them $2.5 million to $1.5 million that the schools have been awarded to support the needs of military-dependent students. In this area, we have received more federal funding to support military-dependent students than almost anywhere else in the nation. They support programs like student-to-student and parent-to-parent. 80% of our funding comes through these grants and through the Department of Defense. So we're really excited that the military understands that the treatment of these children does need to be taken care of, and they're investing. So they're not going to open more Department of Defense schools, but they're really taking a look at what they can do for these children and what they can do for these families. So it's really exciting for me personally because I'm also seeing other things happening in the community. Anyone here affiliated with United Way? Phenomenal. United Way has started a new initiative. It's called Mission United. And they are drawing together service organizations that work with military families for every need. I'm one of those, MSEC is one of those services. I have an office over at United Way right outside of Carol McCormick's office. Through Mission United, it's a one-stop funnel, so if a military family is having a need, whether it's paying their bills or making sure their children are getting a good education, they've just got to go through one place through Mission United, give their contact information, tell them what they need, and all of these other organizations will come together to make sure they get what they need. So whether it's a place to sleep for the night, or a crib, or one time I sent my husband all the way on a flight to Korea to get socks. I mean, of all the silly things. He said, "What do you want from Korea?" And I said, "Can you get me socks for the boys? They have no socks." But we have weird needs, and when you PCS, sometimes your materials don't quite arrive with you. So are we almost done?
No, we're a little closer than that.
Okay, last slide, and then I will sit down. This is the MSEC investment, and then one more slide. That is my contact information. But if you go to militarychild.org, you will see all of the videos, and you'll also be able to kind of scroll through and see what we're investing in this community. Lots of good information. If you take a look at this little flyer, the back is fun facts about military-dependent students. Inside, we have information about some of the programs available for those students that we would like you to refer other organizations to. And we are a coalition, and we are free to join. So if you go to militarychild.org, you can join the coalition and continue to learn more.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Reminder of Rotary, 4-way test is on the other side, and if you have nothing to do on Friday mornings, we'd love to have you on a more permanent basis. And you have one last job to do. You need to pick.
Your numbers are not even in there, Paul.
Hat.
We threw your tickets away, Paul.
Last 3 numbers read aloud, please.
Okay. 293.
Oh, man.
Richard got it.
Ladies and gentlemen, I would wish you a very joyous holiday season. I'm going to be politically incorrect. Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. We a gift to the world. We stand adjourned.